My name is Margaret Lewis, though most folks in town still call me Maggie. I'm 52 years old, a widow for almost 15 years, and the proud, though sometimes too proud, mother of one son, Daniel. When my husband, Richard, passed away, Daniel was only 12. People said I'd fall apart. Instead, I went to work. I cleaned houses during the day, took bookkeeping jobs at night, and kept our small two-bedroom home standing by sheer will and duct tape. I used to joke that the smell of lemon polish and instant coffee was the perfume of survival. Daniel was my reason for breathing. Every award, every scraped knee, every college acceptance letter, my whole life moved in rhythm with his. I wasn't perfect, but I tried to raise him to be kind, respectful, and grateful. And for a long time, I thought I had. The first time he brought Lena home, I knew the world had shifted a little. She was beautiful, impeccable makeup, soft voice, expensive shoes that didn't belong on my porch. She shook my hand like she was touching something fragile. "So nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Lewis," she said, her smile just a little too polite. I told myself she was nervous. I told myself Daniel deserved someone who made him light up the way he did when she walked into a room. But something in me, the part that had learned to read people after years of scrubbing their kitchens, knew this woman didn't see me as part of their future. Still, I smiled through every dinner, every conversation about their plans. "Mom, Lena's thinking of having a spring wedding," he said one evening over the phone. I could hear her laughter in the background. "You'll love the venue. It's by the lake." "Sounds lovely," I said. "Do you need help with anything?" There was a pause. Then his voice softened, careful. "Lena's parents have it covered, Mom. They want to handle the arrangements. That should have been my first clue. But love makes mothers blind in ways heartbreak never can." I just said, "Of course, honey," and smiled at the silence that followed. Weeks turned into months. The wedding talk grew, but the invitations, the fittings, the planning, none of it included me. Sometimes Lena would post pictures online, her and her bridesmaids giggling in matching robes, cake tastings, dress fittings. I'd see them when mutual friends tagged me by accident. One photo stopped me cold. Daniel standing with Lena and her parents, all of them laughing around a table covered in champagne glasses. The caption read, "Family dinner before the big day." Family. My name wasn't in the caption. My face wasn't in the frame. Still, I tried to stay positive. I even picked out a soft blue dress for the wedding with matching shoes I bought on sale. I wrapped their gift carefully, a framed photo of Daniel and me from his high school graduation, the day he'd said, "We made it, Mom." But as the weeks drew closer, the distance between us grew. Calls turned shorter, messages took longer to answer, and whenever I tried to bring up wedding details, he changed the subject. "Mom, it's just been hectic, you know?" he'd say. "I understand, sweetheart. I just want to make sure everything's handled," he'd interrupt, sounding tired. "Please don't worry." It was a Thursday when the invitation arrived. Thick white envelope, gold lettering. I sat at my kitchen table, fingers trembling as I slid the card out. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Daniel Lewis and Lena Grant." For a moment, my heart swelled. Then my eyes caught on the details. Name, Margaret Lewis, misspelled. +1, crossed out in neat black ink. It was such a small thing, but it said everything. I ran my thumb over the scratched line where +1 used to be and laughed softly. The kind of laugh that keeps you from crying. That night, I ironed Daniel's old childhood shirt that I still kept in the linen drawer. The one with the faded soccer logo. I pressed it flat and thought about the first time he said he wanted to make me proud. I whispered into the empty kitchen. "You already did, baby." "You already did. The morning of the wedding, I woke early. The air smelled like spring rain, soft and forgiving. I made my coffee, slipped into my blue dress, and pinned my hair into a simple bun. I looked at myself in the mirror, not young, not old, but someone who had carried years quietly on her shoulders. Before leaving, I looked around the house, the photos, the chipped dishes, the clock that still ticked 5 minutes fast. It was all built with love and endurance. "Let's go see our boy get married," I whispered. When I arrived at the venue, a sprawling garden surrounded by white tents and laughter, no one recognized me at first. Guests milled around with glasses of champagne, their clothes bright and crisp. I walked to the check-in table, holding my invitation. The young man behind the list smiled politely. "Name, please?" "Margaret Lewis," I said. He scanned the list. Scanned it again. His brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't here." I thought he was joking. "Could you check again?" "It's Margaret, M-A-R. He shook his head, sympathy flickering in his eyes. "It's not on here. Maybe there was a mistake." I felt the eyes of people behind me start to shift, curious, whispering. My chest burned, but my face didn't show it. I gave him a small smile, folded my invitation neatly, and said softly, "No mistake. Not anymore." Then I turned, heels clicking against the stone walkway, and walked away. The laughter and music faded behind me as I reached my car. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel, feeling the world tilt. But then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to myself, "Sometimes silence is the only way to be heard." And with that, I started the engine. As she drives away from the venue, her phone lights up with an unknown number, and something in her gut tells her this wedding day isn't over yet. The drive home that afternoon was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the car, pressing on your chest like a weight. Outside, the sky had turned gray, and raindrops dotted the windshield in soft, deliberate patterns. I didn't cry, not yet. I think I was too numb to. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the coffee mug I'd left on the porch that morning was still half full, the liquid cold and untouched. I sat there for a moment staring at it. Funny how the smallest things remind you of everything that's gone wrong. When I stepped inside, the house greeted me with that same stillness that had become my companion over the years. The photo wall on the right, every frame, every milestone, told the story of a life spent building someone else's future. Kindergarten graduation, college acceptance, the first paycheck Daniel ever earned. He'd insisted on treating me to dinner. Now, I wondered if any of it had truly meant something to him, or if I'd been clinging to memories that no longer existed for him at all. The phone rang just as I set my purse down. My heart skipped. For a moment, I thought it might be Daniel, calling to apologize, to explain, to say there'd been some misunderstanding. But the voice on the other end wasn't his. "Mrs. Lewis?" "It's Helen, from the bank." Helen had been a friend since forever. She'd seen me through Richard's passing, helped me refinance the house, even handled Daniel's student account when he was in college. Her voice now sounded hesitant, almost nervous. "I hope I'm not bothering you on a weekend," she said carefully. "I just wanted to confirm something before processing it." "Processing what?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "A transfer," she replied. "Large one. From your joint account with Daniel. The memo says venue payment." My throat went dry. "My joint account?" "Yes, ma'am. You're still a co-owner." "I assumed you knew." "I didn't," I said flatly. "How much?" She paused. "Everything, Maggie. The full balance." For a long moment I said nothing. My eyes drifted to the kitchen window, where the rain had picked up, streaking the glass in blurred silver lines. "Thank you, Helen," I whispered. That's all I needed to know. When I hung up, the tears finally came. Quiet ones at first, then heavier, deep, aching sobs that felt like years of exhaustion breaking loose. I wasn't crying just because of the money. I was crying because that phone call confirmed something deeper. I hadn't just been forgotten. I'd been used. I thought of all the times I'd said, "Don't worry about paying me back, honey." The way he'd smile, promise he'd take me somewhere nice once things were settled. The way I'd trusted him, my own child, to protect the one person who had never stopped protecting him. And now, on the day he was supposed to start his new life, he'd paid for it with the remains of mine. The rain outside became a downpour, but I didn't move. I sat there, staring at the invitation on the table. That neat black line crossing out +1, that misspelled name. It wasn't an oversight. It was a message. You don't belong here anymore. Hours passed before I finally stood. My hands still trembled as I walked down the hall toward the small cabinet Richard built years ago, the one with the brass handle that stuck a little when you pulled it. Inside were our old documents, insurance papers, bank statements, and the property deed we'd updated when Daniel moved into the new house. I flipped through each folder until I found it. Title of ownership, 221 Maple Lane. Daniel's house. Or so he thought. I remembered the day I'd helped him sign the papers. He was newly engaged, excited, broke. I'd co-signed the mortgage, promising to help him until he got on his feet. But the transfer of ownership? It was never completed. I'd kept it in my name for tax reasons, planning to switch it over after the wedding. Now, as I looked at that signature line, blank, unclaimed, I realized that fate had given me a second chance. I ran my fingers over Richard's old pen, still resting in the drawer beside the paperwork. "You always said to keep a backup plan," I whispered. "Guess you were right." By evening, my mind had settled into a cold, focused calm. I wasn't going to scream or beg. I wasn't going to ruin his big day. But I wasn't going to let this betrayal go unanswered either. I spent the next few hours reviewing every account, every document I still had connected to him. My savings, my will, my property rights. I made notes. Quietly, methodically. Revenge, when done right, isn't about rage. It's about precision. Before going to bed, I stood at the window, watching the rain slow into a drizzle. Somewhere out there, my son was dancing under bright lights, surrounded by people who believed they'd won something. Let them. Because tomorrow, when the bank opened and when the lawyers picked up their phones, the ground beneath their pretty new world would start to shift, and I would be the one pulling the strings. As she closes the cabinet, her phone buzzes again. This time it's a photo, sent anonymously. It's from the wedding, her son and his new wife smiling beneath fairy lights. But the caption chills her to the bone. She didn't need to be there. We handled it. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the soft glow of the streetlight flicker through the curtains. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, the little boy who used to fall asleep on my lap after long soccer practices, who'd beg me for one more bedtime story, and then I'd see his grown-up face, smiling under fairy lights, holding another woman's hand, while I sat miles away like a ghost no one remembered. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to show up to the wedding again. I wasn't going to shout or cause a scene. That wasn't my way. I would handle this the same way I'd handled every hardship life had thrown at me. Quietly, deliberately, and with grace that would haunt them. Still, part of me needed closure. So I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the early sunlight spill across my front yard. The garden Richard had planted years ago was in full bloom. White lilies, his favorite. I whispered, "You'd tell me to let it go, wouldn't you?" The kettle whistled before the answer could come. Around 10 that morning, my phone buzzed again. Another photo from an unknown number. This time it was Daniel and Lena at the altar. His arm was around her waist, her veil catching the light like spun glass. Beneath it, just 2 words, "Finally ours." My stomach twisted. Whoever sent it wanted me to see. Maybe it was Lena's family. Maybe it was someone from the wedding party. Either way, they underestimated me. They thought humiliation would break me. But humiliation is just the soil where resolve takes root. I looked at the papers still spread out on the table. Deeds. Accounts, contracts, and realized I wasn't powerless. I was the foundation beneath their new life, and they'd forgotten that the ground can always shift. By noon, I was in my car again, driving toward the lake. Not the wedding venue, but the old dock Richard and I used to visit every anniversary. I needed the calm before the storm. The air smelled of water and pine, the breeze gentle. I stood there for a long time, letting the sound of rippling waves quiet my heartbeat. Then I opened my purse and took out the framed photo I'd wrapped for the wedding. Daniel and me at his graduation, arms around each other, eyes shining with pride. I looked at it for what felt like hours. Then I placed it carefully on the dock's edge, letting the glass catch the sunlight. "You were my greatest joy," I whispered. "But you've chosen your side. Now I'll choose mine." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. I pressed play. It was Helen. "Maggie, it's me again. I didn't want to bother you, but I thought you should know. There's been another transaction request. It's not just the joint account. Someone tried to access the estate account, the one you set aside for future transfers. I stopped it, but I think it came from Daniel's login." I froze. My fingers went cold. Estate account. That was the last bit of savings Richard and I had built. The one untouched account that would have ensured my stability for retirement. Daniel knew about it, but he was never supposed to have access. Unless someone convinced him he had a right to it. My breath came out shaky. "Thank you, Helen," I whispered. "Don't let anything move without my signature." "Already locked it down," she replied. "You okay?" I swallowed hard. "I will be." When I hung up, something inside me solidified, the final piece of anger turning into focus. I no longer felt pain, only clarity. That evening, while the sun dipped low and painted the lake in orange and gold, I sat with my notebook open and began listing every asset, every account, every string still tied to my name. By the time I was done, the page looked like a blueprint. I wasn't just taking back control. I was building a quiet reckoning. As I packed up to leave, my phone rang again, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. For a second, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. "Mom?" His voice was cheerful, unaware. "Hey, I just wanted to check on you. Everything okay?" I almost laughed. "Everything's fine," I said, my voice calm, steady. "How's the wedding?" "Oh, it's beautiful," he said, and I could hear the music in the background, the clinking of glasses. "Lena's happy. You'd love it here. The lake looks amazing." I looked out at the water, almost identical to what he was describing. Funny how we could be standing under the same sky and yet live in different worlds entirely. "I'm glad," I said softly. "I hope you both get exactly what you deserve." He chuckled, not catching the weight of my words. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." When the call ended, I stared at the reflection of the sunset on the lake. My heart was calm again, but not forgiving. Not yet, because by tomorrow morning, everything he thought he owned, every luxury he'd built his pride on, would belong to someone else. Me. As night falls, she receives a message from Helen. "Maggie. Something strange just happened. Daniel's new wife added her name to the property insurance on your old address, 221 Maple Lane." She stares at the screen, realization dawning. They weren't just excluding her from the wedding. They were erasing her completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt heavier somehow, each creak of the floorboards echoing louder, like the walls themselves were whispering reminders of everything I'd lost. I made tea I didn't drink, stared at the phone I didn't want to touch. But the last message from Helen, "They added her name to your property insurance," kept replaying in my mind like a siren I couldn't silence. My house. My late husband's legacy. My son's home, because of me. And now her name was on it. At some point, I put on my coat and stepped outside. The night air was cool and wet, and the distant hum of crickets filled the quiet. I walked the block slowly, letting the rhythm of my footsteps calm the shaking in my hands. Somewhere between my front porch and the corner streetlight, I realized I'd reached a point of no return. I wasn't just a forgotten mother anymore. I was the obstacle they were trying to erase. I whispered to myself, half in disbelief, half in clarity. They don't know who they're dealing with. By morning, my kitchen had turned into a small command center. Papers spread across the table like puzzle pieces, coffee cups lined up like soldiers. Deed documents, tax records, power of attorney forms, each one a piece of leverage I hadn't realized I still possessed. See, Richard had been a careful man. After his heart attack, he made sure I understood everything. Every clause, every account, every signature. I used to tease him for being paranoid, but now it felt like he'd left me a map for this very moment. The first call I made was to Helen. "Morning, Maggie," she said, voice low. "Rough night?" "You could say that," I replied. "I need copies of every transaction Daniel made this month, especially any payments connected to the property or the wedding." She hesitated. "Technically, I shouldn't—" "Helen," I interrupted gently. "Please." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "You'll have them in an hour." When the email arrived, I opened it slowly. Line by line, it told a story far worse than I imagined. Wedding venue payment, catering deposit, dress fittings, all withdrawn from the joint account. But what twisted the knife wasn't the money. It was the recipient name for several transfers. L. Grant Lewis. Lena had been given access. Daniel had made her co-signer. Without telling me, the betrayal wasn't an accident. It was a project, planned, coordinated, executed. I leaned back in my chair, the sound of my own heartbeat filling my ears. For years, I'd imagined Daniel's life as something I'd helped build, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Now it was clear. I'd built the house, but someone else was living in it. Still, anger alone wouldn't serve me. I'd learned long ago that emotional storms only make the ground muddy. If I wanted justice, I needed the weather to stay calm. I drove to 221 Maple Lane that afternoon, the house I'd signed for, the one Daniel and Lena now called home. The neighborhood was one of those new developments with trimmed lawns and mailboxes that all looked the same. As I parked across the street, I saw the "Just Married" banner still hanging on their porch. 2 champagne flutes sat abandoned on the steps, glitter confetti sticking to the walkway. For a moment I just stared. The curtains were open. Inside, boxes still half unpacked. A white wedding dress hung over a chair. It looked like a beginning, but I knew it was already the start of an ending. I didn't go to the door. Instead, I walked the perimeter of the house slowly, noting everything: the fencing line, the driveway space, the small garden in the back that I'd helped Daniel design years ago. He'd wanted tulips. I'd planted them myself. They were blooming now, bright and pink, against the base of the house that still legally belonged to me. My heart tightened, but there was no weakness in it this time. Only resolve. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the mailbox, the yard, the driveway, the title number etched on the property post. Evidence. Proof. Then, before leaving, I placed a folded note under the welcome mat. It read, "Every story has a mother. Don't forget who wrote yours." When I got home, I called my attorney, Mr. Blake, a good man, older, quiet, with a sharp sense of fairness. "Margaret," he said after listening to everything, "do you have proof of ownership?" "I do," I said, "and the deed's still in my name. They tried to add her to the insurance without my consent." He let out a slow whistle. "Then you hold all the cards, my dear. What do you want to do?" I smiled faintly. "I want them to realize they built their happiness on borrowed ground. Then we'll start by freezing any property modification rights and notifying the insurance company. That'll get their attention." "Good," I said. "Let's make it effective immediately." That evening, I sat on my porch again, watching the sun sink behind the trees. My phone buzzed with a message from Helen, all accounts locked. "No withdrawals without your consent." The second message came minutes later, from Daniel. "Mom, what did you do?" "Lena's freaking out. The bank called. Why can't we access anything?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. "Ask your wife." Then I turned off my phone and went inside. In the quiet of my living room, surrounded by memories, I whispered to the air, "You thought you could erase me, but I built the ink you're written in." I closed my eyes and felt, for the first time in a long time, peace, not from forgiveness, but from knowing that my silence had finally become power. As she sits in the dark, her landline rings, a number she doesn't recognize. She almost ignores it, but answers anyway. A man's voice says, "Mrs. Lewis, this is Detective Harmon. There's been an incident at your son's property. You might want to come down." When the detective said incident, my blood ran cold. For a moment, I thought something terrible had happened. An accident, a fire, something irreversible. But his voice didn't sound panicked, just measured, professional, like a man who'd seen too many families unravel in too many ways. I grabbed my coat and keys, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. The drive to 221 Maple Lane felt longer than ever, even though it was barely 15 minutes. Every second my mind raced. What if they blamed me for something? What if Daniel was hurt? What if this was all some twisted escalation I'd never intended? When I turned onto their street, flashing lights washed over the perfect little cul-de-sac. 2 police cars, a tow truck idling, and right in front of the house I once helped finance stood Daniel, still in his tux from the wedding. Tie undone, his face pale and furious, I parked across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Lena stood beside him, crying. Though even from here, I could tell it wasn't grief. It was humiliation. I took a slow breath, stepped out, and walked toward them. "Mrs. Lewis?" the detective said as I approached. "Glad you came. We were trying to reach you about the property." Daniel turned, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stopped a few feet away. "I got a call." His jaw tightened. "A call? From who?" "The detective," I said evenly. "About my property." Lena's tears stopped instantly. She turned toward the detective. "Her property?" He glanced at his notes, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Title and insurance records confirm ownership under Mrs. Margaret Lewis. It seems there was some confusion about residency and registration. Daniel blinked. Confusion? No, this is our house. The detective lifted a brow. Not legally, sir. The deed was never transferred. I'm afraid Mrs. Lewis here still holds the rights. For a second, the world seemed to stand still. Then, like a storm breaking, Daniel exploded. Why would you do this? He shouted, stepping forward. You knew we were living here. You said you'd sign it over. I said I would, I cut in quietly. After the wedding, he froze. After, I repeated. Not before. Not while you were using my money to pay for things you never even asked permission for, Lena scoffed, folding her arms. Oh, please. You're acting like some saint. We were just trying to start our life, and you, what? You wanted control? You can't stand that he has someone else now. The venom in her tone didn't sting. It clarified. Because in that moment, I saw her clearly, not as my son's wife, but as the architect of this entire betrayal. The detective stepped in. Folks, let's calm down. The reason we're here is the property dispute escalated. Someone tried to file a false ownership change this morning. Digital signature flagged. That's a federal offense. Lena's face went white. Daniel turned to her slowly. Lena? She said nothing. The detective continued. We traced the IP address to this residence. That's why I called Mrs. Lewis, to verify her claim. Silence. The kind of silence where truth doesn't just speak, it screams. Lena finally broke it. I didn't think she'd notice so fast, she blurted, panic cracking her voice. You said she never checked her accounts. Daniel stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman beside him. What did you do? I thought, she stammered, clutching her chest. I thought it was a formality. Your mom always said. I held up a hand. Enough. Even the detective fell quiet. You thought you could take everything I built, I said softly, my voice shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer force of restraint. You thought I'd stay quiet, like I did when you kept me off the list, when you emptied my savings, when you laughed in pictures that should have had my name somewhere in the frame. Lena looked away. Daniel's eyes fell to the ground. But here's the truth, my dear, I continued. You can erase my name from your guest list, but not from the deed. Not from the foundation that paid for the roof over your head. This, I gestured to the house. This was built with love, not greed. And now it's going to return to the hands that understood its value. The detective cleared his throat softly. Mrs. Lewis, do you want to press charges? For a moment I thought about it, about the satisfaction, the justice, the image of Lena in court, explaining how greed led her to forge my signature. But then I looked at Daniel, my son, my only child, standing there in the wreckage of his choices, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. No, I said finally. Not yet, the detective nodded. Then I'll file the report as a property violation and leave the decision open. As he walked away, I turned to Daniel. You'll get a notice in a few days. 30 days to vacate. After that, the house reverts to me. Mom, please, he whispered. We have nowhere else to go. I met his eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't see my little boy. I saw a man who'd let someone else write over his mother's name. You had somewhere once, I said softly. With me. Then I turned and walked back to my car. At home that night, I sat in the dark again, the sound of the rain faint outside. My hands trembled as I picked up the framed graduation photo that still sat on the counter. The boy in that picture would have never done this. But the man was still learning who raised him, and as I placed the frame back down, I whispered to the quiet room, You wanted freedom, Daniel. Now you'll learn what it costs. Her phone vibrates. Another message, this time from an unknown number, again. He's not done yet. You should check the trust account. Her breath catches. She opens her laptop. What she sees makes her go completely still. Daniel has tried to move the last remaining inheritance fund, the one Richard left in her name alone. The message glared up at me from the screen. He's not done yet. You should check the trust account. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I clicked into the account portal, my hands trembling on the keyboard. There it was, Richard's inheritance fund, the one account I had never touched, the one thing that kept me safe, and right below it, a notification, pending transfer request. Initiated by Daniel Lewis. I froze. It wasn't possible. He didn't have access to that account. The passwords, the security questions, everything was private, personal. But then I remembered something small and stupid. A few months ago, Daniel had come over to help fix my Wi-Fi router. I'd given him my laptop password to reconnect the account. I didn't think much of it, but clearly, someone else did. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen reflecting in my glasses. The hurt had gone beyond emotional. This was survival now. I picked up my phone and called Helen again. She answered on the first ring. "Helen," I said, my voice low but steady. "There's a pending transfer on the trust. I need it stopped, immediately." "Already saw it," she replied. "I locked it before it could go through." "You're safe, Maggie." "But this was bad. He used your saved credentials. Someone must have taken screenshots." My stomach twisted. Screenshots. I could see it in my mind. Lena watching over Daniel's shoulder as he typed, pretending to help while she memorized every keystroke. "Thank you, Helen," I whispered. "Don't lift that freeze until I tell you personally." "You have my word." When I hung up, I sat there in silence, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen. Then I opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Contingency Plan." By sunrise, I was no longer the woman they'd excluded, humiliated, or underestimated. I was the executor of my own justice. The first step was legal. I met with Mr. Blake, my attorney, again that morning. He listened quietly as I laid everything out. The forged signatures, the false ownership claim, the attempted transfer. When I finished, he sat back, adjusting his glasses. "Margaret, you understand that what they did is not just morally wrong. It's criminal." "I do." "Then tell me, what exactly do you want?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I want them to live with the consequences." "Not for a week, not for a month, for years," he smiled faintly. "Then let's make that happen." We spent hours setting up protections, asset locks, title transfers, will updates, digital trail documentation. Every loose end I'd ever ignored, I tied tight that day. By afternoon, my world was airtight, and theirs beginning to unravel. The second step was personal. I drove to a small storage facility outside town, one Daniel didn't know existed. Richard and I had used it for years to store old files and furniture. But in one locked box, labeled Estate Docs, were items Daniel had never seen. The secondary deed to Maple Lane, the insurance policy transfer forms, and, most importantly, the trust beneficiary designation. Originally, Daniel was listed as secondary beneficiary. Not anymore. I pulled out the form, replaced his name with my niece, Clara, the one person who'd visited me regularly and never once asked for money. When I signed my name on the dotted line, my hands didn't shake. For the first time in weeks, they were steady. That evening, I returned home, poured myself a cup of tea, and opened the curtains. The sky outside was streaked with gold, one of those perfect early summer twilights where everything looked softer than it felt. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I let it ring twice before. "Answering. Mom," he said quickly, his voice panicked. "What's going on?" "Lena says the accounts are frozen, the title's being rechecked. The bank said you filed claims." "I did." "Why?" he demanded. "You're ruining everything." I stayed quiet for a beat. Then I said calmly, "No, Daniel. I'm fixing everything you tried to ruin," he scoffed. "We're family. You can't just—" I cut him off. "Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't erase the person who raised them. You made your choice when you let her put her name where mine used to be." He went silent. I could hear his breathing, quick and uneven. "Mom," he whispered finally. "Please." Lena didn't mean for it to go this far. "We just—" "Stop," I said firmly. "You had a choice between honesty and greed. You chose greed, so now live with it." Then I hung up. The next morning, Helen called. "You'll never believe this," she said. "Your son and his wife came in to fix the mistake. They were yelling in the lobby." I almost smiled. "And what did you tell them?" "That it's not a mistake," she said with a laugh. "It's law." "Good." As soon as I hung up, I opened the last page of my notebook and wrote one final step in my plan. Do nothing. Let time and truth do the rest. For the next few days, I stayed silent, the quiet kind that unnerves people. I didn't respond to texts, didn't pick up calls. I watched the chaos from afar. The eviction notice, the failed mortgage update, the frozen accounts. I knew it all, and I didn't lift a finger. By the end of the week, I got word that Lena's credit line had been revoked due to fraudulent signature investigations. Their wedding gifts? Returned to pay damages. The honeymoon trip? Cancelled. Funds reversed. Every thread they pulled to tie their new life together had turned into a noose of their own making. And me? I just sat by the window each night, sipping tea, the phone quiet for once. Because revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits still and waits to be noticed. That peace shatters when a loud knock echoes through the door near midnight. She opens it to find Daniel standing there, drenched, desperate, eyes full of regret. "Mom," he whispers. "Please, she left me, and I have nowhere else to go." The sound of the knock at my door was heavy, not frantic, not violent, but weighted with something that felt like surrender. When I opened it, Daniel stood there, drenched to the bone. The rain poured behind him, like the sky itself was tired of watching us fall apart. His tux jacket was gone, shirt wrinkled and clinging to his skin. His eyes, the same eyes that used to light up when he'd run home from school shouting, "Mom, guess what?" now looked hollow, ashamed. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "please." "She's gone." Lena packed up and left. I don't know what to do. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in slowly, dripping onto the rug. The house was warm, filled with the faint scent of chamomile and lemon cleaner. Home. He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time in years. "I didn't know where else to go," he whispered. "You always had a place here," I said quietly. "You just forgot it existed." He dropped his gaze. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped the windows softly, steady as a metronome marking time between the past and the present. Finally, he said, "I messed up." I looked at him, but didn't speak. I thought she loved me," he continued, voice breaking. "She said all the right things, Mom. She told me I deserved better than living under your shadow. She said she'd make me independent." And I believed her. God, I was so stupid. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I wanted to reach out and hold him the way I used to when the world felt too big for his small shoulders. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Stupid," I repeated softly. "No, Daniel, you weren't stupid. You were selfish." He flinched. "I would have given you everything," I said, my voice shaking now, years of hurt finally breaking the surface. "All you had to do was ask, but instead you let her convince you that the hand that fed you was something to bite. That love was a leash, that your mother was a burden to be hidden away." His lip trembled. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. You let it," I said. "And every time you looked away while she erased me, you made a choice." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom, I'm so sorry." I sat down across from him, my tea untouched. "Apologies don't fix stolen things, Daniel. They don't fix trust. And they don't fix what happens when a mother stops believing her child still remembers who she is." He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking. The sound of his sobs mixed with the rain outside. Raw, unfiltered, human. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance, like watching a stranger wear my son's face. When he finally spoke again, his voice was small. "Can I stay here tonight? Just until I figure things out?" I studied him for a moment, then nodded. "The guest room's clean. You remember where it is?" He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom." But I wasn't done. "Daniel," I said evenly, "understand something. This isn't forgiveness. This is shelter. Forgiveness comes later, if it ever does." He nodded slowly. "I understand." I watched him walk down the hall toward the guest room, the same room he used to sleep in when he was a boy, the one still painted the color of his childhood sky. As he disappeared inside, I exhaled deeply, exhaustion washing over me like a tide. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. I sat in the living room, lights dim, the ticking clock the only sound. My phone sat on the table, silent, until suddenly it began to ring. The name flashing across the screen made my heart stop. Lena. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me swipe to answer. Her voice came through sharp, brittle, and slurred with anger. "So you think you've won?" I stayed silent. "You ruined everything," she spat. "You turned Daniel against me. You embarrassed my family. You made us look like fools." I smiled faintly. "I didn't have to turn him against you, dear. You did that all by yourself. You think you're clever, don't you? Freezing the accounts, taking back the house. Taking back what was mine," I corrected softly. There was a long pause on her end. Then her tone changed, quieter, darker. "You'll regret this." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, letting her words hang in the air like smoke. Then, from down the hall, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "Mom?" he said, stepping into the doorway, sleepy and confused. "Was that her?" "Yes." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wet again. "She's been calling me, too. She says she's going to the police. She's telling everyone I stood up slowly. She can tell them whatever she wants. The truth is written in every document she tried to forge. Let her dig her own grave." He swallowed hard. "I don't deserve your help." "You don't," I agreed. "But I'm your mother." That's the curse and the mercy of it. For a long time, we just stood there, the two of us, framed by the glow of the hallway light, caught somewhere between ruin and redemption. Then faintly, from the guest room, his phone began to ring. He turned toward the sound, confused. "Who's calling me this late?" I didn't answer. I just knew, deep in my gut, what that sound meant, 'cause I'd heard that ringtone before. It was the same tone that played in the background of his wedding video, the one I'd watched online the night they banned me from attending. And as it rang again, louder this time, Daniel's face went pale. He walked over to the phone on the nightstand, picked it up, and stared at the screen. His voice broke into a whisper. "It's her. She's sending me pictures." I stepped closer. "Pictures of what?" He turned the phone around. My breath caught. There, glowing on the screen, was a photo of me, standing outside his wedding venue, taken from behind the glass doors. The caption read, "You shouldn't have brought her back." The phone slips from Daniel's hand, hitting the floor with a crack. Margaret stares at the message, her calm giving way to a chill she hasn't felt in years. Outside, through the window, headlights flash briefly, then vanish. Someone had followed him here. The night felt alive. Not in a peaceful way, but in that quiet, electric way before something breaks. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like thunder. Daniel stood frozen by the window, staring out into the dark driveway. His phone lay shattered on the floor, the screen cracked straight through Lena's last message. I picked it up carefully, the glass edges catching light from the lamp. The photo still showed me, standing outside the wedding venue, like a ghost looking in. My stomach tightened. "She's watching," I murmured. Daniel's breathing quickened. "Mom, she must have followed me here. I didn't tell her I was coming." I stayed calm. "She didn't need you to. She knows your habits better than you think. That's what manipulators do. They study the people they use." He swallowed, guilt painting his face in pale shades. "What do we do?" "Nothing rash," I said. "She wants a reaction. She wants chaos. Let her drown in her own noise." Still, I double-checked the locks on every door and window before I went to bed that night. I left the porch light on, not out of fear, but as a message. If she was out there watching, I wanted her to see that I wasn't hiding. By morning, the storm outside had moved on, but inside, a different kind was brewing. When I turned on the local news, Lena's face filled the screen. A reporter stood outside the Maple Lane property, cameras flashing. The headline read, "Newlywed couple faces fraud investigation, dispute over ownership turns ugly." Daniel walked into the room just in time to hear the reporter say his name. His shoulders slumped as the story unfolded. Bank accounts frozen, signatures under review, a joint property claim flagged for forgery. The neighbors had given interviews. The police had confirmed an open investigation. "She's the one who started all this," he said weakly. "But now they're saying I was part of it. Were you?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "I didn't mean to be," I sighed. "That's the thing about silence, Daniel. It makes you complicit, even when your hands are clean." He sat on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Everything's falling apart." "Good," I said, my tone flat. "Now maybe something better can take its place." He looked up, startled by the edge in my voice. "I told you before," I said, "forgiveness is earned. You don't get it just because you've hit rock bottom." A few hours later, my phone rang again, this time from a number I recognized. "Detective Harmon." "Mrs. Lewis," he said. "Thought you'd want an update. We've issued a warrant for Lena Grant Lewis. Evidence points to her as the primary actor behind the fraudulent property documents and attempted fund transfers. We also found several threatening messages sent from her device." I glanced toward the window, where Daniel stood watching the drizzle return. "She sent me one last night," I said quietly. "Yes, ma'am. We have reason to believe she's left the state. But don't worry, we'll find her." "Thank you, Detective." As I hung up, I felt something loosen in my chest. The kind of release that doesn't feel like victory. It feels like survival. By evening, the story had gone viral. Social media was flooded with posts. "Groom's mother reclaims house after being banned from wedding." "Bride under investigation for fraud. Mother-in-law outsmarts couple." I didn't ask for any of it, but people love a scandal wrapped in poetic justice. My face wasn't in the photos, but the internet had already painted me into a legend. Daniel, on the other hand, was crumbling. His job called to suspend him until things cleared up. Friends stopped answering. The wedding guests who once laughed beside him now whispered about him online. He sat at the table that night, staring into his untouched food. "They're calling me a thief," he said. "They think I was part of her plan." I took a slow sip of tea. "Then you understand what it's like to be accused of something you didn't do." He flinched. "I spent years being called controlling, dramatic, too involved," I continued. "When all I did was love you. Now you get to feel what it's like to have people rewrite your story." "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "Please don't." I set the cup down gently. "Daniel, I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing it so you learn. So the next time someone hands you the pen, you remember who actually gave you the paper." He nodded, tears streaming down. "I don't know if I can fix it." "You can't," I said softly. "But you can start again." "That's something." The next morning, as sunlight cut through the curtains, I stood by the window, watching Daniel load a small bag into his car. He'd decided to stay at a motel for a few days, to get space. I didn't stop him. "Mom," he said, turning back, "will you ever forgive me?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe one day, when you learn the difference between guilt and growth." He nodded, eyes full of shame and something like hope. As he drove away, the phone on the kitchen counter started buzzing again. A familiar sound. I picked it up. It wasn't a call. It was a notification. Transfer complete. I froze. It was from Lena's account, the one under investigation. She'd just wired every dollar she'd stolen back into mine. Attached was a single message. "You win." I stared at it, then whispered to the empty kitchen, "No, dear. I survived." That's different. Later that night, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Lena. It was the detective. "Mrs. Lewis, just wanted you to know, they found her, out near the border. She turned herself in." I closed my eyes and breathed out slowly. "Thank you." He hesitated before adding, "Your son came by earlier to give his statement. He defended you, you know, said you were the only one who ever told him the truth." For a moment, the world went still. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. "Detective," I said softly, "that's all I ever wanted." As she ends the call, the house feels calm again. But when she looks at the window, something catches her eye. An envelope tucked under the porch light. Her name written in perfect cursive. Inside, just one line in Lena's handwriting. "You can have everything back. But he'll always remember who took his piece." Morning arrived slow and silver. The kind of dawn that stretches across the sky like it's still deciding what kind of day it wants to be. The house was quiet again. No phones buzzing, no footsteps pacing the hall, no arguments muffled by closed doors. Just the low hum of my old refrigerator and the smell of rain still clinging to the air. On the counter sat the envelope Lena had left, thin, cream-colored, my name written in perfect cursive. I'd read that single sentence a dozen times. You can have everything back, but he'll always remember who took his piece. A threat wrapped in poetry. Or maybe just guilt trying to make itself look important. I tore it once, twice, then dropped the pieces into the sink and turned on the tap. The paper softened, blurred, and vanished down the drain. That chapter was done. Later that morning, I drove into town. The gossip had already traveled faster than truth ever could. At the grocery store, people whispered as I passed. The widowed woman who'd outsmarted the pretty young bride. The mother who reclaimed what was hers. I didn't mind. Let them talk. For once, the story being told about me wasn't a lie. I stopped by the bank to see Helen in person. She met me in the small office behind the teller line, eyes tired but smiling. "Your accounts are clear, Maggie," she said. "Investigation's closing soon. Looks like you're finally free of all that mess." "Free," I repeated, tasting the word. It felt strange, heavy, but right. She hesitated. "And Daniel? How's he holding up?" I gave a soft sigh. "He's learning what it means to start over with nothing." "I suppose that's the best lesson he could get?" Helen nodded. "Sometimes that's the only one that sticks." Before I left, she reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. You protected what was yours." I smiled faintly. "I didn't just protect it. I reclaimed it." Back home, I walked through each room slowly, as if reacquainting myself with my own life. The quiet no longer hurt, it healed. The framed graduation photo was still on the table, the one I'd almost thrown away. I straightened it gently. There was a time I thought motherhood meant giving until there was nothing left. But love without boundaries isn't devotion. It's destruction in disguise. I had learned that the hard way. That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Harmon again. "Mrs. Lewis, just wanted to inform you, Lena's been formally charged. She's taking a plea deal. That'll keep your name out of court." "Good," I said simply. "I've had enough of courtrooms and ceremonies for one lifetime." He chuckled softly. "You know, you might have saved your son's life doing what you did. If she'd gotten access to that trust, she would have drained every cent." I didn't respond right away. My throat felt tight. "He's still my son, Detective," I said finally. "Even when he forgets it." 2 weeks passed before I heard from Daniel again. One afternoon, his car rolled quietly up the driveway. He looked thinner, older somehow. When I opened the door, he didn't speak. He just held out an envelope. "It's everything I took," he said. "And some I earned. I want to start paying you back." I looked down at the envelope but didn't take it. "Money doesn't pay for absence, Daniel. Or betrayal, I know," he whispered. "But it's a start." I stepped aside, letting him in. The air between us was still cautious, but it no longer crackled with anger. Just understanding. We sat in the kitchen, the same table where he'd done homework as a boy. "I saw the news," he said quietly. "They called you the woman who outsmarted them all." I chuckled. "That's not exactly a title I wanted." He smiled weakly. "You didn't just outsmart her, Mom. You saved me from myself." His words lingered in the space between us. Fragile but sincere. "I don't know if I'll ever deserve forgiveness," he continued, "but I want to earn your trust again. One day at a time." I nodded slowly. "That's all I ever asked for. One day at a time." As evening came, he helped me close the shutters, and for the first time in months, the house felt like a home again. The weight that had lived in my chest began to lift, piece by piece, replaced by something quieter. Peace, maybe. Or simply the absence of chaos. Before bed, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the twilight soft and golden. Across the yard, the mailbox flag stood upright. Inside was a single letter, no return address. When I opened it, I found a property statement confirming final ownership transfer, 221 Maple Lane, Margaret Lewis. My signature gleamed at the bottom, firm and clear. The house was officially mine again. I laughed softly to myself. Richard would have been proud. As the first stars blinked awake in the sky, I whispered to the night, I didn't need revenge to feel whole. I just needed my name back. The wind carried the words through the trees, gentle and sure. Later that night, as Margaret prepares for bed, the house phone rings one last time. When she answers, a familiar voice says softly, "Mom, I found something you should see. It's about Dad's old trust. There's more in it than you ever knew." Her heart stills mid-beat. For the first time in months, she feels both fear and hope in equal measure. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "Daniel, what did you just say?" His voice on the other end was quiet, careful. "It's about Dad's trust, Mom. I found an old letter in a safety deposit box. The one at the downtown branch. It's addressed to you. It's been there since 2009, the year Richard died." My breath caught in my throat. "Are you sure it's for me?" "Yes," he said. Your name's written on it in Dad's handwriting. You should see it yourself. For a moment, I didn't move. Then I whispered, "All right, I'll meet you there in the morning." The next day dawned cool and blue, the kind of morning that carries the scent of old rain and new beginnings. I arrived at the bank early, the same place where I'd signed away pieces of my life years ago. Tuition checks, mortgage papers, dreams too fragile to afford. When Daniel walked in, he looked different. Not perfect, not fully healed, but steady. His shoulders weren't hunched anymore. There was humility in his step, not defeat. He handed me a small brass key. "Box 142, I told them you'd be coming." Inside the vault, the air felt cold still. The clerk led me to a small private room and left us alone. I slid the key into the lock, my fingers trembling. The box creaked open, revealing a single sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. My name scrawled in Richard's familiar hand. "To my Maggie. In case you ever need to remember what's yours." I pressed the letter to my chest for a moment before opening it. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and old ink. "My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm no longer there to remind you of who you are. So let me do it here. I know how you worry. You've always carried more than your share of weight. Mine, Daniel's, even burdens that were never yours to begin with. The account you and I built together, the one marked as closed? It isn't. I left a portion untouched, hidden in a trust you'll find under my attorney's file, labeled Legacy Account. Use it when you've forgotten how powerful you are. Use it to start over if life ever tries to take everything from you. But above all, never let anyone make you feel like you're less than the foundation they stand on. Love isn't meant to make you smaller." Richard, I read it twice before lowering the paper. My hands were trembling again, not from anger this time, but from something softer. Relief maybe, or grace. Daniel watched me quietly, his eyes glistening. "Mom, does this mean there's more money somewhere?" I laughed, an unexpected light sound that startled us both. "No, honey. It means your father knew me better than anyone ever did." "But the trust—" "Daniel," I interrupted gently, "the trust isn't the point. It's what he left in me that matters. The reminder that I've been fighting for what's mine long before anyone tried to take it." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the floor. I wish I'd understood that sooner. I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. Understanding late is still better than never. Outside, the sky had turned bright and clear. We walked to the parking lot in silence, the city humming around us. Before getting into his car, Daniel turned to me. "Mom," he said quietly, "I don't know if we'll ever be what we were again. But I want to try. I want to earn my way back." I looked at him, really looked. Not as the boy I'd raised or the man who'd betrayed me, but as someone finally learning humility. "You already started," I said softly. "You showed up." He smiled faintly, eyes red. "Do you still love me?" "Always," I said. "But loving you doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering everything and still choosing peace." He nodded, tears threatening again, then whispered, "You really are the strongest person I know." I smiled. "I learned from the best. Your father didn't leave me a fortune, Daniel. He left me a backbone." That evening, I sat on the porch as the sun melted into gold over the treetops. The wind carried the scent of lilies, Richard's flowers, blooming wild by the fence. I took out his letter again and read it one more time, letting the words sink deeper this time. Then, with a steady hand, I tucked it into the same wooden box where I kept our wedding photo. For the first time in a long while, my heart didn't ache when I looked at the picture. I thought about Lena, wherever she was now, and I didn't feel anger, only pity, because the thing she could never understand was that power doesn't come from what you take. It comes from what you can still give after everything's been taken from you. As twilight deepened, I poured 2 cups of tea, one for me, one for Richard. "Old habits never die. To endings," I whispered, raising my cup toward the empty chair beside me, and to beginnings that waited their turn. A breeze rustled through the lilies, soft and approving. Inside the house, my phone buzzed once, a message from Daniel. I stopped by the old house. "The tulips are blooming again, just like you said they would," I smiled. "Good," I murmured. "Maybe that means we're all growing again." That night, before bed, I wrote one final note in my notebook, the same one that once held my plans for revenge. This time, it wasn't a plan at all. It was a truth. Sometimes walking away isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-respect. Revenge fades, but dignity echoes. I closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet hold me, not as a punishment, but as peace finally earned.